Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when no one was around? What if I told you that the line between reality and the supernatural might be thinner than you think? You're watching Echoes of Fear, the channel where we give voice to the scariest and most disturbing stories you've ever heard tonight. I'm going to share 3 true horror stories, yes, true, that will make you rethink the safety of your own home. Get ready to explore the fear of forgotten places, encounters with the inexplicable, and mysteries that were never solved. These stories aren't just about what you can see. They're about what you can't see, about the whispers in the shadows, the footsteps that no one else hears, and the presences that creep up when you least expect it. And don't be fooled, evil doesn't have a time or place to strike. So if you're brave and ready to discover what hides in the dark corners of reality, don't leave. Hit play, close the curtains, and pay attention, because what you're about to hear will leave you with the feeling that something is always behind you. These are 3 true, scary, and disturbing horror stories, and they start right now. Sarah had always had a peculiar taste for old places. When she found an apartment on Eldridge Avenue in the heart of Chicago, she didn't hesitate to move in. The building, a Victorian-era construction, had that kind of decaying charm that drew her in, the kind of place that seemed to tell untold stories, something Sarah loved to explore. While the location was perfect, the building had something odd about it. It sat on a quiet street, surrounded by trees, with a peaceful atmosphere during the day. However, at night, the mood changed. The streetlights, often dimmed, gave the area an almost unreal vibe. For the first few weeks, Sarah didn't notice anything unusual. She was busy with college and settling into her new life. But one night, when she came back home, she began to notice something strange. Sounds of footsteps in the empty hallway, which stopped abruptly when she approached. At first, she thought it was just the building creaking, but it soon became clear that the footsteps followed an irregular rhythm, as if someone was moving around the house at night. One evening, while sitting in her apartment reading, Sarah heard a faint laugh coming from the hallway. The sound seemed to be coming from apartment 3B, a place she rarely saw occupied. When she approached to investigate, she felt a cold draft and saw a shadow move quickly through the partially open door. She knocked, but no one answered. The laughter continued to echo in her mind. Things took a turn for the worse when she started to feel a presence in her own apartment. At night, the air became heavier, as if something were watching her. A sense of oppression overwhelmed Sarah, and she couldn't explain where it came from. It was then that, while visiting the basement to store some items, she found an old black and white photo of the building with a man smiling in front of it. It was an old photo, probably taken early in the 20th century. Curious, Sarah researched the photo. She discovered that the man in the picture was named Robert Cullen, a former resident of the building who mysteriously disappeared more than 30 years ago. Reports from that time mentioned his strange behavior before he vanished, including claims that he spoke about seeing things, feeling followed, and even a dark figure visiting him at night. Some said he was one of the last residents before the building was converted into apartments. On a particularly cold night, while examining the photo again, Sarah felt a presence behind her. She turned quickly and found a man with a familiar smile. It was Robert Cullen. He stared at her with empty eyes and a smile that didn't seem human but oddly reassuring, like a guest waiting to be welcomed. The apartment grew cold and the lights began to flicker. Before she could react, the door slammed shut and she couldn't open it. Sarah was never seen again. The next day, when the police arrived, the apartment was empty, but Robert Cullen's photo was on the table. The building was closed for investigation, but nothing was found. However, old residents still say they hear footsteps in the hallways at night, and many claim Sarah may have become just another presence haunting the building. When the city sleeps, the sound of footsteps can still be heard by those passing near the old Eldridge Avenue. Now let's go to the second story. Kevin and Amanda were on an epic road trip along the famous Route 66, the historic highway that runs across the United States from Chicago to Los Angeles. They were excited to explore what remained of this iconic stretch of road, passing through small towns and forgotten places. When they reached Barstow, California, they decided to stop at an old roadside motel. The motel, though outdated, had a welcoming atmosphere and seemed like the perfect spot to rest before continuing their journey. The motel was almost empty, except for an elderly man who stayed at the front desk. He greeted them with a friendly smile, but there was something about his gaze that Kevin couldn't quite place. It was as if he knew something but didn't want to say. They thought it was odd but didn't pay much attention and headed to their room. That night, after a simple dinner at a local restaurant, Kevin and Amanda returned to the motel. The air felt denser, as if the very road had absorbed the day's heat and left an odd tension in the air. When they entered the room, something felt off. The door slammed shut behind them with no wind. The lights began to flicker, and the radio, which was off, started playing an old country song from decades ago. Amanda felt a chill run down her spine, as if someone were watching them. When she looked out the window, she saw a dark figure, wearing a cowboy hat, standing in the road, staring directly at the motel. The figure didn't move. It was as if it were waiting for something. The discomfort grew, and Kevin, trying to find a logical explanation, decided to step out of the room and speak to the man at the front desk. When he returned, Amanda was gone. The room was empty, with no signs of struggle or any indication she had left willingly. The oddest thing was that the door was locked from the inside. Kevin desperately searched for her in the deserted streets of Barstow, but he couldn't find a trace. The road was empty, and the man at the front desk seemed unfazed, as if he already knew what had happened. He tried reporting the disappearance to the police, but no one seemed to believe his story. The officers told him he must have been a victim of a prank, but Kevin knew something more was going on. In his search, he heard from a distance the sound of a song playing softly from somewhere on the road, a song that made him feel strangely exhausted, as if he had lost all desire to continue his journey. No one knows what truly happened to Amanda, but travelers passing through the area at night still report hearing distant country music, as if someone were singing a lullaby, trapping those who listen on the road forever. We've finished the second story. Now let's move on to the third. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being here. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, share your stories in the comments, and let's get started. Woodford County, Kentucky was a quiet region, marked by vast farms and picturesque landscapes. The place, usually peaceful and serene, hid, however, a dark secret. A few miles from the town, on the main road, there was an abandoned farm that everyone avoided. The house, old and imposing, stood isolated, surrounded by thick fog that seemed to always hover over the land, as if the place were immersed in a constant feeling of mourning. But it wasn't just the sinister appearance of the property that kept people away. It was the story surrounding it. The history of the farm dated back to the 19th century, when Henry Williamson, a man with a robust appearance and a serious expression, bought the property. He built a grand mansion atop a hill, from where he could observe the vastness of his land. Henry moved to the house with his wife, Annabelle, and their 3 young children, and they quickly became known in the small local community, though some felt uneasy about the man's peculiar behavior. Some said Henry would spend hours staring at the horizon, lost in thought, while his wife and children lived more reclusively, rarely seen outside the property. But everything changed on a stormy night. One of the most violent storms the region had ever seen struck Woodford County, with strong winds knocking down trees and lightning illuminating the sky, as though the very universe were in a rage. During that storm, the Williamson family disappeared without a trace. What was even more disturbing was the discovery of Henry, days later, in a completely bizarre state. He was found wandering the woods, his eyes wide open and a strange smile frozen on his face. His mouth twisted into an odd grin, as if he had been taken by some kind of trance. He was unable to explain what had happened. His words were disconnected and made no sense, and when taken back to town, he seemed completely disoriented. The only thing he could say was about a dark visitor, a presence that had made him see indescribable things. The police investigated, but no clues were found, and the case was closed with no resolution. The farm was then left to rot in abandonment. In the years that followed, no one dared live there again. The house was slowly consumed by nature, with trees and plants overtaking the property as if the very earth itself was trying to hide what had happened there. However, the locals always whispered about the farm. They said that during storms, the house seemed to come alive, as if it were a dark entity, hungry for something. The wind would howl through the broken windows like desperate screams, and doors and windows would slam shut by themselves, as if something, or someone, was inside, moving through the shadows. The older locals avoided passing by the farm, and those who dared talk about what had happened seemed to be overtaken by an inexplicable feeling of dread. It was then that David and Emily, two investigative journalists known for their courage and determination, decided to visit the farm. They had heard about several disappearances over the years and were determined to document the mysteries surrounding the place. Armed with cameras, recorders, and flashlights, they made their way to the farm, eager to uncover what had truly happened there. Upon arriving, they were immediately engulfed by a sense of heaviness in the air, as if something was watching them. The house, much more deteriorated than they had imagined, was covered in moss, and the main entrance was almost completely blocked by thick vegetation. The sounds of nature seemed muffled by the oppressive silence of the place. The smell of mold and rotting wood was unmistakable, and the sensation of being in a place where time had stopped was overwhelming. The wind seemed to whisper through the broken walls, as if something was trying to communicate. As they entered, the environment was a labyrinth of darkness and decay. The wooden floor creaked beneath their feet, and the walls, covered in mold, were cracked and broken. There were no furniture pieces in good condition, but broken pieces of furniture were scattered around the room. Photographs on the walls were faded, with the faces of people becoming increasingly indistinct, as if they were being erased by time itself. In one corner of the main room, an old piano was partially destroyed, and the sound of its broken keys seemed to echo through the air, as if it were a warning from beyond. While exploring, David found something unusual on the upper floor, a diary, half deteriorated, hidden under loose floorboards. The notes, written by Henry Williamson, were disturbing. He spoke of nightly visits, from a shadow, something that watched him and made him feel trapped in a nightmare. On some pages, he described how his wife and children had disappeared, but always with the same repeated phrase, "They are there, but I cannot reach them." The last pages were more confused, filled with drawings and meaningless words, but one thing was clear. Henry believed he had heard his wife and children's footsteps on the stairs and the whispers of his children calling him back. Suddenly, a sigh echoed from the basement stairs. Emily, who was closer, quickly turned around and screamed upon seeing a shadowy figure in the corner of the basement, partially illuminated by her flashlight. The figure stood still, but it was clearly watching them. David tried to approach, but as he took a step forward, the figure disappeared into the darkness, as if it had melted away into the shadows. The air grew heavier, and the sound of doors slamming shut began to fill the space, creating a sense of impending chaos. They tried to escape, but the doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. Panic set in as the figure, a woman with empty eyes and a sinister smile, reappeared and slowly advanced toward them. The air grew heavier, and the house seemed to close in on them. Emily screamed, but her voice was silenced as the figure drew closer. In a final scream of terror, both journalists vanished, as if the house absorbed their souls. Their disappearance remains a chilling mystery, and it's said that during violent storms, their screams can still be heard, echoing through the farm, trapped forever in the cursed house, now part of its dark history. Well, everyone, that was our video today with 3 real horror stories. I hope you were as scared and intrigued as I was. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the Echoes of Fear channel, and hit the bell so you won't miss any new stories.